But also, we have a lot going on nationally. We followed along. We had Congressman Kelly Armstrong on last week talking about where we are with House speakership, and all the talk at that time was, whether or not Jim Jordan had enough votes. Well, he didn't after repeated attempts, and then certainly when they went behind closed doors, he had even less support than the public support they did on the House floor. So it kind of left a scramble of who might be next, and people started talking instantly about Tom Emmer from Minnesota, and the fact that he's the majority whip shows that he is able to get some votes within that party. And I wanted to know a little bit more about Representative Tom Emmer, and to do that, I said, you know what? Well, how about we reach out to our good friend Bill Werner, Minnesota News Network, to learn a little bit more. Bill, welcome back, my
Hey,
friend. How are you?
Tyler, it's good. It's good to be back. We had a little bit of a hiatus, but we're back in the thick of things again, aren't
We
we?
are unexpectedly so.
Yep.
Usually, this is a slow time
Yeah.
for
Correct.
us on this side of the river, and now I'm looking at two potential national figures coming right out of Minnesota. One with
Yeah.
potentially being speaker, and we'll get to Dean Phillips a little bit later on.
Yeah. On
Maybe
the
running.
presidential race,
Yeah.
possibly there too. Right. Hmm.
But Tom Emmer is making the rounds. He formally said, "Yep, I'll run for this." I think it was Friday night, if not Saturday morning.
Yeah, I think he firmed it up actually Saturday morning, but gave real strong indications on Friday late that he was going to do it. Yeah. Right.
He instantly got backing from former Speaker Kevin McCarthy, saying, "Yeah, Tom's the
Right.
guy out of everybody else. This is the person." In fact, he was on the Sunday morning talk shows, doubling down on that. But as far as Representative Emmer, give the sense. What do you hear? What's the presence around Tom Emmer like in Minnesota?
Yeah, and of course, the thing we need to keep in mind is that there are 9 candidates in the race, at least at this point. Now all this stuff is happening pretty much behind closed doors, right? There are discussions going on. We heard reports that, unconfirmed reports that the candidates are doing presentations today, and that they're, at least at this point, the plan is for a closed caucus vote, kind of a taking of the temperature, I guess, would be maybe a good way of saying it, tomorrow. So, Emmer, in terms of his qualifications, I mean, being that he's majority whip, so he's third in line, right, in terms of authority in the United States House, he's probably the best positioned in terms of the actual qualification or the position that he holds. But it's really a question of, does the same dynamic play out again with him that played out with McCarthy, that played out with Steve Scalise, and that played out the opposite way with Jim Jordan? I mean, in the sense that certainly that McCarthy, what caused his ouster was a dissatisfaction on the part of a very far right group of lawmakers in the Republican caucus and the Republican conference.
Mm-hmm.
And that played out with Scalise's abortive attempt, right? And then, but it cut the other way for Jordan,
Right.
because then Jordan was too moderate or too radical rather for some in the caucus. And now we're back to to Emmer, who is closely associated with both McCarthy and Scalise.
Mm-hmm.
He has McCarthy's endorsement, as you mentioned. So it's really a question, Tyler. Has anything really changed here?
Right. Yep.
I mean, do we have a candidate who is really in a different position than any that have been offered in the past? And the analysts that I'm talking to are not really so sure that there is much difference.
What's interesting, Bill, is when I'm been following along throughout the weekend here, it seems like the test is whether or not you voted to certify the 2020 election results.
That's one of them, and of course, former President Trump has been signaling. Now he hasn't said it through himself personally, but he's said it through operatives who've tweeted it or X'd it, I guess now, right?
Yeah.
That he's dissatisfied that Emmer is not the person he wants, and there's a couple of things that former president's operatives are referring to. One is because Emmer, at least the former president, is contending, or his people are contending, has not forcefully defended Trump against some of the indictments that he's facing, not stood up for him. He's criticized Trump after the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol, and he was one of those also, we should note, too, who voted to certify the election results on that fateful day of January 6th, right? And so all of those things have not really played well. And there's analysts that are saying it's, potentially the kiss of death for Emmer's bid for House Speaker if you don't have Donald Trump in your court.
And
that's
Bill,
a pretty tough one.
Yeah, and Bill, to that, you're right. The allies of the former president have come out basically saying, well, he's not one of us. He's not backing the former president strong enough. And today, actually just within, I think, the last hour, I was able to catch some audio. The former president, Donald Trump's in New Hampshire, filing to be on that primary ballot. This audio that we're about to play for you, and I'll get a reaction from you.
Good. Yeah, let's listen.
Yeah, from former President Donald Trump when asked about Tom Emmer. Boy, it's a Monday afternoon, isn't it? We'll get through it though. I assure you.
Nope, I know what you're saying.
But take a listen to this, Bill. This is former President Donald Trump in New Hampshire.
Did you endorse Tom Emmer for Speaker? He hasn't historically been your biggest fan, but he is the most likely candidate right now.
Well, I think he's my biggest fan now because he called me yesterday and he told me I'm your biggest fan. So I don't know about that. Well, we're looking at a lot of people, and I'm sort of trying to stay out of that as much as possible. But they'll get it straightened out. But no, I've always gotten along with him, and I get along with all of them, really. A lot of good people. We have a lot of great people.
Audio is not the best there, as you know how some of those skirmishes.
No, we got the gist of it, though.
Yeah,
I think.
He said that Tom Emmer's my biggest fan now. He called me yesterday.
Well, yeah, and it's a question of, I mean, former president there is certainly, if there are some objections that he has to Tom Emmer, he's certainly soft pedaling them if there are. So I think it's an interesting statement. I don't think it's conclusive based on some of the signals that some of his operatives are sending, but we'll have to see.
What I gathered from that is exactly where you're building at. There's some angst there, but he doesn't want to be the one that's got the dirty work. He'll have his allies do this and find somebody that is in fact favorable, or if not, certainly Tom's going to have to be doing a lot more to maybe kiss the ring, so to speak, to get that verbal endorsement. It's interesting because I think while former President Trump was in office, Tom Emmer voted along with his policy proposals like 90% of the time, Bill.
Yeah, but then there are those key areas that surround kind of the January 6th, right, the election, that at least have been brought up by the president's people. And I don't know, my gut feel would be that Emmer probably has to gain some momentum in this early round, and then maybe there's some additional, as you say, kissing of the ring, right? Yeah. That might be necessary, but it's all tough to say. I think just on the surface of it, the signals that the former president has sent are going to certainly make Emmer's job tougher. Now, is it insurmountable? I don't know. We're going to have to see. But, then it's a question of does he even if he ultimately gets Trump's imprimatur, what about the other members of the Republican caucus that objected to McCarthy and to Scalise? Right.
Right.
Is that enough? Is that enough for them? And I'm not so sure based on what's happened in the past. But then again, this is just one reporter's observation.
Well, and I can tell you, because we had one member on last week, if you were to ask a Republican member of that caucus saying what happens next, they don't have answers either. They have no clue where this ends up, and we'll learn a lot tomorrow morning for sure. After they have their kind of closed door, hey, we'll have a secret ballot. I don't know if they'll do a approval voting in that process or what, but hopefully, we just want some resolution to this. Obviously, I think everybody's in agreement there.
Yeah, I think we'll get an idea. It's probably, as I said, a taking of the temperature, right?
Yeah.
And whether, in fact, things are moving that direction. I think if you see Emmer come out in terms of with some momentum out of this, all right, then maybe, and again, it's just speculation on my part, then maybe you're to the point where you have additional discussions with Trump's people or with the former president himself, and you go from there. But we'll just have to see.
We will.
Real volatile fluid situation.
It is. And if you had the answers, you would be a political strategist that people would pay a lot of money to actually have some answers provided to them, Bill.
That's right. But instead, I'm a reporter.
Yeah. And that's,
there you go.
but, we know of Representative Emmer, but not as intimately as somebody like you that has been reporting, on him, and somebody like Dean Phillips, which I want to get your take on as well. Because you have, a Minnesota congressman on the Democratic side who's kind of hinted around saying, I don't know that I'm comfortable. In fact, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think he stepped down from a leadership position within the party because he's not happy that there's so much backing of Joe Biden. But you got Dean Phillips, a Democrat, saying, I might test the waters. What have you been hearing when it comes to the Phillips camp?
Yeah, and then there are a lot of reports out there, and excuse me, probably the most reliable reports are pointing to that he's going to make an announcement Friday in New Hampshire. But some of the sources there are saying also that people are telling them, well, now, but he could still not do it. So, all right. So it's not a foregone conclusion, but it's kind of pointing to Friday in New Hampshire, which is the deadline that he needs to file, right, in that state. And then you get into a question of, okay, does he file as a Democrat to challenge President Biden for the Democratic Party nomination, or does he run as an independent? And most people are assuming that he's going to go, the people I've talked to, that he's going to go the Democrat route. But the other would be an option as well. And each of them has, well, I mean, he has said that he has a sense of it, that there is a desire to have different options, right? And I think part of that comes out of what some people have said, and I believe certainly the congressman has been the same, questioning the president's age. And so where does that go from there in terms of a potential challenge to someone who is the presumptive nominee, right? Of the Democratic Party. Does he get any traction on that? And can he get traction? And most people say he's not going to be able to get enough traction to get the nomination, probably, unless something changes dramatically. Then is he burning bridges politically?
See, and that's what I was wondering there, Bill, because the profile's not there for Phillips, not yet, not nationally speaking. Where if you come out and you rock this boat, do you burn, as you say, the bridges if something were to happen?
And there's a thing there too. There's another dynamic also. The 3rd congressional district, which is kind of the western Twin Cities suburbs, and the southwestern, so it tends to be a wealthy area, generally, at least higher than average income, right, for the metropolitan area. That district has been represented by moderate Republicans as well. Jim Ramstad, as an example, represented that district for many, many years. And so now we have a Democrat in there. But I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that it's a blue or that it's red. It's that purple range or whatever, either purple red or blue red. And so therefore the question would be, okay, well, if the Democrats hold a grudge against Phillips for challenging a sitting president, are they shooting themselves in the foot, because then they potentially lose the 3rd congressional district?
Right.
And in terms of what's happening with all the national politics and wrangling for control of the House coming up soon, right, next year already.
Yep.
I mean, what happens in that regard? Do Democrats risk losing that district rather than having a sure thing, potentially sure thing kind of a candidate, or does the fact that if he breaks ranks and challenges the president, does that peel some Democratic votes away from him, even in his own district?
Bill, you're able to tie these two together in a way I didn't see coming, saying, you know what, because all of a sudden with the speakership, in flux, has people wondering, why should we vote Republican in that situation? And all of a sudden, if you lose a Democrat and that kind of purplish district,
and whether the 3rd would be the deciding district, Minnesota's 3rd congressional district, well, probably not, but it would be one of perhaps others, that And so that's kind of the dynamic that's working there. So, and of course, if Phillips goes the independent route, well, then he's out there and he's got to file and all this, get on the ballot in all the states, and that's a
tall
I
order.
think even a longer shot, I would think. But it's an interesting state of affairs.
Bill, I appreciate the check-in, man. I'm out of time. I could visit with you all afternoon. Let's do this again soon, all right?
All right, good. Good talking to you all, okay?
Yeah, you
all
take
right.
care. Yeah. Bill Werner, Capital Correspondent, Minnesota News Network. Lots of messages in. Adventure RV text line about 35270. I'll come back to your thoughts right after this.
We still got the moon and stars above.